We will discuss now some of the halachas of the 3 weeks and the 9 days, which we all hope will speedily be transformed in days of joy and happiness with the coming of Mashiach now. The period that is known of the 3 weeks is comprised of a number of different periods. Most famously, everybody knows there's a period of the 3 weeks, which starts from the fast of Shivos B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, and continues through the 9th of Av, finishes with the 9th of Av, which is also a fast day. And then there is the period of the 9 days, which starts from Rish Chodesh Av, from the beginning of the month of Av, until after the fast of the 9th of Av of Tisha B'Av. In truth, really, in most cases, the prohibitions and things that we refrain from during the 9 days really last, the 3 weeks and the 9 days really last up until the 10th day, the day after Tisha B'Av, until midday. Within the period of the 9 days itself, there's a distinction between the week, which Tisha B'Av actually falls out in, and the rest of the earlier days of the 9 days, which start before the week that Tisha B'Av falls out in. In this regard, there's a big difference between the Sfardim and the Ashkenazim. The Sfardim usually follow the rulings of the Mechaber, Rabbi Yosef Kairo, the author of the Shlchan Aruch, which certain things he only prohibited from during the week of Tisha B'Av itself, during the week which Tisha B'Av falls out in. However, the Ramah, Ramoshe Isserlich, which the Ashkenazim follow, ruled on many things that we are stringent in them already starting from the beginning of the month of Av. The shir will be, I'm going to base it on the Kitzur Shlchan Aruch, which obviously follows the rulings of the Ramah, follows, for Ashkenazim. I will from time to time elaborate on certain things, but obviously there are many details which, is beyond the scope of the shir. And any relevant case one should ask it of, if one has any particular question that we need special guidance for. In Kitzur Shlchan Aruch, in siman Kuf Chav Beis, the laws that pertain from the 17th of Tammuz until after Tisha B'Av. Since from the 17th of Tammuz started the calamities of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, that is why certain laws of mourning start already from the 17th of Tammuz and they last until after Tisha B'Av. It is fitting it's brought down, not everybody does this, but the Kitzur Shlchan Aruch brings down that it's fitting for every Yirei Shemayim to do a Tikkun Chatzos, which we know is special prayers that are done to mourn the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. So even those that don't do Tikkun Chatzos regularly, but it's brought down, there are those people that do it during this period of 3 weeks. They do it by day, not by night, but besides doing it by night, they do it by day at midday, after midday. The laws regarding the 3 weeks, he writes that we don't marry women, there's no chasnas taking place, even somebody which didn't yet fulfill the mitzvah of pru revu, of having children. However, engagements are allowed, and even engagement parties like a l'chaim are allowed until the beginning of the 9 days, until Rish Chodesh Av. From Rish Chodesh Av, from the beginning of Av, which is a period of the 9 days, although engagements themselves are permissible, however, you cannot make a meal, but a small get-together with which you serve pastries, in other words, you don't serve a real meal, just a few things you put down, cake, whatever it is, in a small way is permissible. Together with that, also during the 3 weeks, we don't listen to live music. Play music, listen to live music. Those that particularly in happy music are stringent even in tapes, a common accepted custom that even if it's not live but it's recorded, many people don't listen to it. A Jew that his parnasa, that his the way he makes his money, if he needs for money to play music, he's a musician, So he's allowed to play music for, obviously for non-Jews, which, obviously Jews, at least for Ashkenazim, we don't hear music during this period. But until the beginning of the 9 days, in order for him to in order what he needs for his parnasa, for his livelihood, he's allowed to play music for non-Jews until the beginning of the 9 days. But from the beginning of the 9 days until after Tisha B'Av, he's not allowed. The day of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz itself is also prohibited. And he adds here also, although it's not pertaining to the actual time frame of the 3 weeks, but also Asar B'Tevis, the 10th of Tevis, which is during the winter, which is a fast which commemorates the beginning of the siege on Yerushalayim, which is also connected with the Churban. So also, we refrain from playing music and so on this day. There are those that don't eat meat and don't drink wine during this period of the 3 weeks from the 17th of Tammuz till after Tisha B'Av, unless it's a Sudas Mitzvah, unless it's like a Bris Milah or Pidin Haben, things that are considered a mitzvah to have a meal, or on Shabbos. Now obviously this is not a widespread custom. The widespread custom is only to refrain during the 9 days, but we're talking here about people that are scrupulous in the mitzvah, so they refrain from eating meat. They're scrupulous in mourning on Yerushalayim, whatever it is, so they refrain from eating meat and drinking wine during this whole period. Obviously, in today's day and age, one would have to really see if it's beneficial for him health-wise to accept this restriction, and if it hinders in any way his avodas Hashem, his learning Torah and davening, so it's something which should not be done. When do the actual restrictions of the 3 weeks start? So it already starts from the night of, usually it's accepted that it starts from the night of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, that already that night, from when the sun set, or Tzeis HaKechavim, when it actually becomes dark, so we actually already from that point on is when the restrictions of the 3 weeks start. In Siv Beis, the Kitzur Shlchan Aruch continues, and he says that we don't make shechianu during these days. That's why we don't buy or put on new clothes, because for new clothes we would have to make shechianu. However, the commentaries, Kitzur Shlchan and others point out that a new garment which one would not have to make shechianu on, because it's not such a chashuv, it's not such a important type of garment, like new shoes or shirts or socks or clothes that one already had and he suddenly bought back. So these things one is allowed to buy from 17th of Tammuz until the 9 days, because for these things one does not have to make shechianu. Same thing would be in today's day and age. In general, there's a discussion whether we make shechianu in general for new clothes. A lot of people, particularly in Chabad, it's also in general, since today's day and age, getting new clothes is not considered something which is such a great simcha, which one makes shechianu. People refrain from making shechianu. So there are those that in general are a bit more lenient in this thing of buying clothes during the 3 weeks until the 9 days, particularly those garments which don't have any chashivas, that because we don't make shechianu. On the other hand, there are those that say that even though technically we don't make shechianu, but buying a new suit or things like that, which technically there is al pi halacha, one should make shechianu, just these days it's accepted that we don't, we still refrain from buying during this period of time. Only those clothes that al pi halacha are not considered a chashuv garment, like socks and underwear and things like that, and those things we buy during this period up until the 9 days. Obviously, in any case, it's neither the person should speak to their dove. However, there are exceptions to the rule. For Pidin Haben, for example, when the custom is that we make shechianu, So they make Shechianu during the Pidyon Haben. So then they make Shechianu because you don't want to push off the mitzvah. So the mitzvahs with Pidyon Haben you're obviously doing, you have to do it on the 30th day after the baby is born. So the father makes Shechianu because if he's not going to make Shechianu now, he'll lose the mitzvah. In other words, the mitzvah is now, he won't be able to make Shechianu another time. There are different opinions regarding making Shechianu on Shabbos. The Kitzur Shlchan Aruch says that on a new fruit one could make Shechianu on Shabbos, or even during the weekdays if you won't find this fruit until after Tisha B'Av. However, other people, Kitzur Harizal and other places in the Chabad and so on, that we don't make Shechianu even on Shabbos even on the 3 Shabbosim during the 3 weeks. Another thing he says is that one should not hit his children or his students during these days. So if a father or teacher is trying to discipline his children or his students, so even though sometimes he might want to hit them, whatever it might be, but during this period of time he's not allowed to, because it's a sakana. It's explained that during this time it's a sakana, and it should be refrained from being done during these days. Gimel. Further, the Kitzur Shlchan Aruch goes on and says that another thing that we don't do during these 3 weeks is we don't take any haircuts. We don't cut the hair of the head or any other part of the body. And the same thing is that we don't, not only older people, which are already, obviously bar mitzvah and obligated in the mitzvahs, but even small children, older people should not give a haircut to small children during the period of the 3 weeks. Siv Dalad, he continues on and he says that the mustache, if it's growing too long that it hurts a person from eating, gets stuck in the teeth and so on. So the Kitzur Shlchan Aruch says that it seems to him that one is allowed to cut it, take away the hair that is growing too long, until the week which Tisha B'Av itself falls out in. But in the week which is Tisha B'Av falls out in, he forbids one to even cut the mustache. In Sif Hey, he speaks about cutting nails. Says cutting nails is only prohibited during the week which Tisha B'Av falls out in. However, if a woman needs to go to the mikveh, she can cut her nails. A moil that needs to cut his nails for the bris milah is allowed to. And the same thing would be the L'chavit Shabbos Mefarshim Yindan, that if Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, so then one is allowed to cut their nails on Friday L'chavit Shabbos, even if Tisha B'Av falls out on that Shabbos, which you don't fast, but nevertheless the week before Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos. According to some opinions, that week beforehand has the din of the week which Tisha B'Av falls out in. Nevertheless, one is allowed to cut their nails that Friday for the Chavit Shabbos. In Siv Vav, he speaks about the special haftarahs that we say during these 3 weeks. We say it's known as a tzlosa de Puranusa, the 3 haftarahs of Puranus, of prophecies about destruction, about punishment, which they start with Divrei Yirmiyahu, Shimu Dvar Hashem, Chazon Yeshayahu. If one, by mistake, did not say on the first Shabbos the haftarah of that Shabbos, so the next Shabbos, in other words, the haftarah of Divrei Yirmiyahu, so the next Shabbos we say both together, Divrei Yirmiyahu and Shimu Dvar Hashem, because they're next to each other in the Tanakh. If Reish Chodesh Av falls out on Shabbos, so then there are different opinions whether we say the haftarah which applies to Reish Chodesh, which we say usually when Reish Chodesh falls out on Shabbos, or if we say the haftarah which is known as Shimu, which belongs to the 3 weeks. Minik Chabad is that we say the haftarah of Shimu, but we add the first and last pasuk of the haftarah of Shabbos Reish Chodesh. In Siv Zayin, he goes on speaking about the laws of the 3 weeks itself. He says that Mishanichnas Av, know that the Shulchan Aruch, the Gemara says, from when the month of Av comes in, Mematin b'simcha, we decrease in simcha. So obviously, this is already a a more stricter, more severe form of mourning than is commonly done during the 3 weeks up until then, starting from Shivas B'Tammuz. From when Av comes in, is that we decrease in all matters of enjoyment. However, obviously, when it comes to matters of Simcha Shal Torah and Simcha Shal Mitzvah, learning and davening and doing mitzvahs with Simcha, so not only we don't decrease in it during this time, but on the contrary, in order to transform and bring out the good and which is hidden within these days. So there's a lot of tzaddikim, the Rebbe very much encouraged that to use out these days to add an inyanim of Torah and Tefillah and Staka, things that are simcha of Torah and Tefillah and Staka, like making siyumim and so on, as we'll see later, in order, even though we can't, when it comes to inyanim of rishus, inyanim of physical things, we have to decrease in simcha, but we should strengthen serving Hashem in a way of simcha. So some of the things that are prohibited because of this mimat and the simcha, because of this decrease in simcha, it says we don't build a binyan shel simcha. You don't build a building, you don't build an extension to one's house if it's being done for purposes of simcha. Or if a person is building something which is only laharvach, if a person is building a house because he needs the space to live in, so that is not considered a simcha, that is not considered an enjoyment. He's doing it because he needs to. If he's repairing his house because he needs, something was a leak or whatever it is, or something broke and he has to fix it, that's not done as a way of enjoyment. However, somebody is building something, just like he's building another house for, as a resort type of thing, something just for enjoyment. Like the Gemara is speaking about Beis Chasnos, you're building a house where people, those days when they used to get married, so they used to build a house for the young couple. So this was done as simcha. Or if a person is building an extra room to his house, which is just doing laharvach, he's just doing for added room, he has enough room in his house to live spaciously, just adding an extra room for extra comfort, all these things are simcha. The same thing would be, regarding the details, would depend, but in general, anything of painting or doing different things around the house, one is, let's say, painting the house, or maybe even putting wallpaper, might be a problem, but just being done to add further beauty and niceness to the house, and not that it's needed in order to be able to live. What happens if a person already may pre-arrange with a non-Jew to paint his house, and it happens to be that it extends until the time of the 9 days? So if he's able to pay him a little bit of money that that he should hold until after Tisha B'Av, so that's the best thing to do. If not, if the non-Jew is not going to readily accept for a small amount of money to push it off until after Tisha B'Av, so then he could let him continue painting his house. A Yid that has a din with a goy, a Yid that has a court case or some other trouble with a non-Jew, he should try to push it off, try to avoid having to have to go to court or dealing with him during these days, because the mazel of the Jewish people is not so great. If possible, he should try to avoid it and push it off until after the month of Av, until the month of Elul, at least until after Tisha B'Av. Some people say it's best to push it off until after the Chamishas B'Av, if possible, the 15th of Av, which is already considered a Yom Tov. Kiddush Levana, we don't do Kiddush Levana until after Tisha B'Av. The reason obviously is because Kiddush Levana is supposed to be done in a way of Simcha, and during the 9 days is not a time of Simcha, so we wait until after the 9 days. Siv Ches. It's a minig b'chol Yisrael, it's a minig amongst all Jewish people, not to eat meat or drink wine in the 9 days that are from Reish Chodesh until after Tisha B'Av. Even food that meat was only cooked, if let's say you're not eating the actual meat, but you're eating the other things that were cooked together with meat, or that has fat from it, is also prohibited. But obviously one is allowed to cook food in a pot that's fleishik, even if fleishik was cooked in it that day, as long as there's no actual mamosh, there's no actual residue of fleishiks in the pot. Even chicken is also, except the minig that is prohibited. But somebody that can't eat other foods, he can't eat dairy foods, and he doesn't have any other thing, can't eat other foods. He could eat chicken. Somebody is sick, he could eat whatever is needed, there's no limitations. However, if it's not hard on him, for a sick person, so he should try to stop, at least from the 7th day of and on, so he should refrain from eating meat, even chicken. Because from the 7th day and of, as we'll soon see, as we'll bring down later, that is the time when the Goyim actually enter the Beis HaMikdash, even though they lit it on fire on the 9th of Av, but the 7th of Av they already went into the Beis HaMikdash and already started, looting the place and so on. So too, certain women that gave birth and they need to eat meat and wine, so some of them refrain from eating meat and wine from the 7th day and of, because that's when the Goyim went into the Beis HaMikdash. Sudas mitzvah meal, which is a mitzvah. For example, a bris meal and a pidyon haben, so we're siyum mesechta, so it's also permissible to have meat and wine. And besides the direct family, like a person's father, zaydis and brothers and sons, and besides those that have a part in the mitzvah, like the sandik by a bris milah, the kohen by a pidyon haben, and so on, so he could invite another 10 people for friends to join and have meat and wine. There's different opinions here. The Kitzur Shlchan Aruch holds that during the whole period of the 9 days, one is only allowed to invite his close family plus another 10 friends to partake in the meal of meat and wine. The other opinions that say that during the 9 days, up until the week that Tisha B'Av falls out in, so then any friend that he would usually invite, would usually attend a meal of bris milah, pidyon haben, is allowed to come to have meat and wine. It's only during the week which Tisha B'Av itself falls in, is that he's only allowed to invite a minyan b'tzumtzum, a limited number of 10, a minyan of 10 friends. But at any rate, this is only talking about people that would come even at another time of the year to this Suda. If they're coming just now during the 9 days because they want to have a chance to eat meat and drink wine, and they generally wouldn't come, is not accepted. This is all permissible until Erev Tisha B'Av, the day before, the eve of Tisha B'Av, until midday, but not after midday. Regarding the siyum mesechta, there are more leniencies. It's accepted that, let's say, in the camp or in other places where everybody, there are leniencies by poskim, since they're all together, so then one can make a siyum for everybody, for the whole camp, and the whole camp could participate in meat and wine. Mini Chabad generally is that, even though we are very into making siyumim as much as possible during the 9 days, but nevertheless we don't usually use this as an excuse to eat meat and drink wine if it's necessary. So I guess you could, there's room to rely on the opinions of the poskim that permit this. But in general, I believe that Rabbi Rasha would make a siyum during the 9 days, but he nevertheless would not eat meat and drink wine. The Suda that some make during the night before the bris, what we call Vachnacht, is not considered a Suda's mitzvah, and it's prohibited to have meat and wine. It should only be done with dairy foods. Regarding the cup of Havdalah Motzei Shabbos during the 9 days, so the Kitzur Shlchan Aruch writes that if there's a small child, you should give it to him. If not, then the one that makes Havdalah could drink it himself. Now regarding this, there's a bit of the poskim explain as follows. A child that we're speaking about here is a child that's not old enough to appreciate the concept of avelus, of mourning for the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, it's better to give it to such a child which still is, since he doesn't yet understand and comprehend the concept of mourning for the Beis HaMikdash, so he's not obligated in the laws of refraining from eating meat and drinking wine as part of the avelus of the 9 days, because he doesn't understand what it is. However, on the other hand, in order for him to drink the wine, the Alter Rebbe holds that he has to be old enough to be of the age of chinuch, to be the age of understanding of what the mitzvah of Havdalah is all about. So what would come out to mean is that we would have to try to find a child which comprehends, already old enough to comprehend that the importance and the concept of the mitzvah of Havdalah, But nevertheless, he still, for whatever reason, does not understand and comprehend the concept of the mourning for the Beis Hamikdash. So technically, it's a bit hard to find such a child that is mature enough to understand this. Havdalah is not mature enough to understand the concept of Avelus. So maybe this is one of the reasons why many places they don't make an effort to give it to a child. They drink the Havdalah, the cup of Havdalah themselves, because even if it's a child, technically the best option was very hard to find the exact type of child that would exactly fit the criteria of to drink the wine. So if there's no child, halach is you could drink the wine yourself. If you are giving it to a child, it's usually hard for children to drink a whole cup of wine. So then it would be good enough if he drinks Malay Lukmov, if the child drinks a cheekful, the amount of wine that would fill up one of his cheeks, that would be good enough, even if it's his cheekful. It doesn't have to be the cheekful of an adult. One cheekful of a child, the amount of wine he would put to one side of his mouth to fill up a cheek, that would be what we call Malay Lukmov. That would be sufficient for him to drink in order for one to fulfill the mitzvah of Havdalah. Again, this is something which is totally b'minig. It depends on the custom. There are those that are always careful to always give it to a child, even though if you want to go into details, it's hard to find the exact child. Other people, Chatchila, weren't careful about this particular halacha, because I guess maybe for the reason we mentioned before, other reasons, and they drank the wine of Havdalah themselves.